Okay.
I like Josh saying, not a technical hitch. Calm, real calm, woman. I think so.
Hi, welcome to Lunaticks Live. I'm Greg.
And I'm Olivia.
And we're going to be doing episode 14 here, live at the Lunaticks and the Foghorn Brew House here on King Street. And as you can hear, the wonderful noise at King Street, busy as ever. However, it's toasty in there, but it's cold out here, and that's why I've got this scarf. And I want you to ask me what this scarf is.
Greg, what is that scarf?
Do you want to touch it?
Not really, but I will. Oh.
So what do you think it is?
Oh, I don't know. What is that? It's soft.
It's possum. Possum, all the way from New Zealand. But don't worry, there's no possums in there. It's all going to be about blockchain and
cryptocurrency.
And some fascinating work that people are doing around and in that exciting space at the moment. But anyway, looking forward to seeing you in there. Lunaticks Live, episode 14, coming to you from the Foghorn Brew House here on King Street. Let's head inside.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Foghorn and Lunaticks Live. This is episode 14, and tonight we are talking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies with Greg Hall.
Thank you very much, Olivia. It's a great atmosphere here. Great. I can smell the hops. Can you smell it? It's fantastic in here at the moment.
I can smell the hops. I'm looking forward to drinking some of the hops.
Absolutely. After the show, of course.
Tonight is a very special evening about some of the most innovative technology in today's market, which is blockchain and cryptocurrencies. It melts a lot of people's brains and makes a lot of other people very rich.
But it hasn't been melting your brain. You've been working very hard to grapple with the...
I'm all over it.
And chat as well, haven't you, mate?
Mate, all over it. We're all over it here.
Oh, good, good. I'm glad somebody is. Oh, great.
Tonight we're going to do a little bit of tech news focused on cryptocurrency. Chad, I hear you have some really fun facts to talk about.
Yes, it's having a look at a lot of the hardware involved. One of the things people don't really take into account for mining Bitcoin and blockchain, and that's the power associated with it. So is it really going to be worth your time or money if you're looking at it from a personal investor point of view? And some of the tricky ways people have tried to fill their own wallets that may not be around the legal component.
What do you mean? What's not legal about cryptocurrencies?
Oh, no, the cryptocurrencies are perfectly legal. It's how people try and mine it themselves, maybe using other people's devices.
So we were having a little bit of a chat about the whole technology landscape, and Chad, in order to mine Bitcoin, what's the process involved?
So the actual processes themselves, it originally started out as people using their computers to mine. And essentially the whizzes, having a look at exactly how they calculated and crunched the numbers, figured out that graphics cards were actually much better at computing and calculating to get the most bang for your buck. And then eventually some hardware companies came out with application-specific integrated circuits. So these specific hardware boxes that you would just plug in and mine. So,
does that mean I can buy this hardware, take it home and become a Bitcoin miner?
You could for the amazing price of $3,000. But if you were to plug it in, power it up, it burns 1,350 watts. So pretty much constantly as if you're running a hairdryer full time, just blasting away.
And I hear, Greg, that it costs about $12,500 worth of energy in order to mine the coin.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it all depends on what you've got. Have you got the Bitcoin? Or you could co-opt somebody else's computer to do it. And that's where the tricky stuff comes in.
Oh yeah, like the bomb, for example. There's has anyone heard the funny story of two IT guys at the bomb who used the tech to create their own bitcoins, and then ASIO turned up?
No, I didn't. Well, Chad, look, it's great with the tech news. Thank you very much for joining us here. But also, we've just got some great guests who are joining us tonight. We've got Stephen Young, who's founder of TrigID, and we also have Andrew McCallum, founder of Oxcoin, who's going to be joining us.
Asha is lost in a refugee camp. She's hungry, and she's worried about the strange man who's following her. No one's looking out for her because she doesn't exist in any record. Bev wants to get into the club, but she doesn't have any ID with her that proves her age, and the doorman won't let her in. Charlie is lying on an emergency room gurney, and the doctors can't find his medical record. Can they give him those antibiotics, or is he allergic? Delia is not getting any sleep. She's just been notified she's a victim of identity theft, and she's worried. Are the thief's actions going to affect her credit rating? Her job prospects? Give her a criminal record? Eric is sick of Facebook exploiting his private life. He just wants to get off. But he can't, because there is no social network forced to respect his privacy. These problems have one thing in common. They'd all go away if there was something that could give each of them a searchable, provable and private identity that was truly theirs. Now there is. It's a blockchain-based platform called TrigID. How does it work? It takes personally identifiable information, like your name, passport number, phone number or face image, and mashes them into safe identity vectors that are added to blockchain. Two or more of these vectors can then be used to prove you exist and let you prove that you are who you say you are. The platform keeps none of your actual information, so it gives zero knowledge to anyone that's using it. In a TrigID world, Asha has a record and she can be identified. She just needs to give her name and the name of her mother. The doorman can verify Bev's age by snap capturing her face with a free phone app and asking for her date of birth. Charlie's doctor is guaranteed to pull up the right medical record and maybe save his life. Delia didn't have her record stolen because no organisation had any need to keep her personal information. And Eric is part of a decentralised social network where he gets to control who sees what. TrigID, triangulation for identity. Instant, universal, anonymous, provable.
Well, so there it is, Trig Identity. It's a pretty extraordinary piece of technology, and I'm told by its founder, Stephen Young, who's joining us here today, here at the Foghorn, that in fact it's the only one that's currently out there at the moment, so it's quite significant. But Stephen, a little bit about your background. You're the founder and chief technology officer of TrigID, and it's a revolutionary new blockchain resident cryptographic technology that preserves your anonymity and your privacy, but allows anyone to test the attributes that define your identity. That's on the website.
Yeah,
so
that's a lot of words, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is a lot of words. Yeah. Yes, that's right. It is the only technology of its kind. It is very new, and we think that there's a great deal of promise, and it solves a great number of problems. And I'm really grateful you showed the video, because it does a much better job than I would do of explaining just the very user.
but no, you can't get out of it that easily. We're here to unpick the Algordian knot to some extent.
Okay.
So now just hold it down there, and that'd be just roughly there, just very relaxed, etc. So originally, though, you were the chief executive officer at FaxNexus Proprietary Limited, which developed the launch of graph-based DBMS and also Public Data Initiative, and you also were the chief executive of Electric Mint. So was that your first stepping or first role as an entrepreneur with Electric Mint?
Oh, look, I've been an entrepreneur all my life, I guess, but and Electric Mint was Electric Mint was a vehicle to, I guess, to peddle my services and the services of people around me as a data person. Right? I've worked in data all my life, and 2010 we changed the name of that company to Fact Nexus, and we focused on a new style of data structure called a graph database, and that's where the graph base product came from. Yeah.
Okay.
So you've been working in data a long time. How have you transitioned from working with data to moving into ID and using blockchain as a way to safeguard?
Sure. So a blockchain essentially is a very large database. It is a database, it's a large ledger, which is a database of transactions, and effectively a relational database or any database that you might use in a technology space is the same thing. It is a bunch of transactions which makes something which you can put data in and pull data out. That is what blockchain is. It's very slow compared with a normal database, but it has the advantage that it is everywhere, it's immutable, and it's consensus. So it's not such a big stretch. It's a very similar set of uses, but done in a different way. And the reason we got into identity is that because blockchain really is a very poor database for a lot of information, but it is a good database for small amounts of information. And so we picked a use case, a set of applications that it's good for. And identity is one of those things.
Now, when we were in preparation for this, we were discussing what it exactly you're trying to solve, but you also mentioned that in terms of the number of people out there on the planet who actually have no identity, you were talking about 1 billion people who are, use the expression, unbanked. So you're thinking this is an area that those people who don't have a bank account obviously are earning very, very small amounts of money and probably trade in a cash economy, could be potentially using this technology? And
Sure.
I'm trying to understand why would they?
Well, sure. So from the third world, I guess, is a place where the lack of a formal identity is most impacts people most. And there are about a billion people who have no formal identity whatsoever. Those are the estimates. And that impacts them when they're refugees, when they're children, for example. They're very easily the victims of human trafficking. And when you talk about people who don't earn a great deal of money, there's probably 3 billion people in the world who earn less than $3 a day. And those are people who don't have access to bank accounts, for example, and credit cards, all the sorts of things that we take for granted. They don't have the capacity to borrow, they don't have the capacity to lend, they don't have the capacity to mortgage. And you can't on $3 a day because the infrastructure is so expensive. But if we can blockchain it, make it consensus and give them a free identity, they don't need any of that stuff. So potentially it's going to make a big difference to those people. So look, I'm very, I guess, very enthusiastic about the sorts of things we can do in the underdeveloped world. We have quite a big team in the Philippines, for example, and every time I go there, I am astonished by the level of poverty. As many as 80% of the population is unbanked. They live on that less than $3 a day, and you see it firsthand.
So is that the primary demographic you're hoping to solve with
no,
this?
No, not at all. Unfortunately, identity is, I guess, an embodiment. When we talk about identity, digital identity, it's an embodiment of lots and lots of different problems. I mean, the problem, I guess, that's most prevalent in people's minds at the moment is this notion of identity theft. You may have heard of the GDPR, for example, which is a major initiative on the part of European governments to tidy up the way information is managed. But there are many technological solutions which are possible, and we feel that if we can put people's identities safely in a public environment, then there is no need for companies to keep personal identity inside their databases. There's therefore nothing to steal. So So that's an opportunity to solve the problem of identity theft.
Let's talk about identity theft for 1 second. Why is it a problem now? Is it because so much information is
Okay, sure.
online? Is that the core problem of identity theft?
I'm sorry?
Why is identity theft such an issue for us to be thinking about?
Look, I think the reason identity theft is a problem is that the world has become more and more digital. People want to get more and more of their stuff into records, whether it's medical records or your insurance records. And when they store all that stuff, it's there available for somebody to come and take. Now, once they've taken it, they can pretend to be you. And when they pretend to be you, they can go and get benefits that would normally be reserved for you. They can get credit cards in your name. They can, I guess, receive unemployment benefits in your name. There are all sorts of things they can do. And so there is a ready market for data which allows someone to steal your identity. And various estimates can be as little as $1 through to as much as $200 or $300 for an identity. And that's why it's a problem. It's a target. Yeah?
Great. So the use of this system, do you need everyone in the world to be a part of the system, or can we subscribe to it? How does it work to safeguard and build?
So I guess when we talk about identity, it's not just about you proving who you are. It's about you and lots of other people proving who you're not, right? So somebody else, Austrac might want to prove, for example, that you're not a terrorist and you're not involved in money laundering. So it can't just be about you. It has to be about the capacity for other people to store information about you in a safe way. So our project is about. We hope to put every single person on the planet inside this data structure over a period of 3 years. So that's 7.6 billion people. And I know that's a lot, and it's potentially a very adventurous undertaking. But one thing that blockchain does and cryptocurrencies do is it enables you to crowdsource that process. So every person with a phone or a PC can safely load up their information and the information of all the people they know about. And you will end up with what is a public resource of information about, or checkable information about every person in the world for all of these services that's there safely.
But I guess, why would I want to do that when really most of my transactions are taking place in a space that I think is pretty secure? I mean, what's the motivation?
Sure. Look, if there's one thing we've seen from this whole crypto space is that people are quite happy with the degree of security that they have. But I'll tell you who's not happy. The banks and the governments are not happy. They don't want to see you doing transactions on the dark web. They don't want to see you buying drugs. They don't want to see you doing human trafficking. They don't want to see you making huge amounts of money and not paying taxes. So much as we would like that complete control of our identity information to remain completely ours, it's not something that our regulators are going to permit. So we're going to make it safe for them.
It's quite an ambitious feat to have every person in the world sign up to your platform and crowdsource our data. Do you need every single person on the planet to put up their hand and
we
be
don't.
involved? So tell us about what the crowdsourcing of this means.
So I guess we'll probably talk a little bit about cryptocurrencies a bit later on, but one thing that blockchain does is it enables us to create token economies. And a token economy is just where you make fake money for a particular purpose and you allow that fake money to be used for a variety of different purposes. So in the crypto space, there are, to give you an example, we have not issued any tokens yet, but we have made a piece of software which says our cryptocurrency is going to be there, and people are doing work for us already. And using that as a mechanism, you can crowdsource things. You can get things done.
Have you launched the product, or is it still in a testing phase?
No, it's still in the testing phase. Yep.
So, and with this stage, where are you moving to? When do you want to launch, ideally?
So, again, because we're talking about blockchain, and because we're talking about an ecosystem and the fostering of an ecosystem, in some respects, it's not the best way to think about it as the efforts of an enterprise like ours. So we are making the software available, we're making the infrastructure available, and we're making the tokenomics available in order for the data to be created, and then we will come along and other people will come along afterwards and use it. So if that makes sense. Without talking about the regulatory environment at the moment, which I'm not sure whether you're familiar with how much difficulty blockchain companies are having at present, where ASIC and the SEC are turning around and saying, no, you can't sell those tokens because they're a security, etc., etc. So whenever we are undertaking a project like this, we have to be mindful of how the regulatory authorities will be looking at it, obviously. But we also want to be mindful of the culture and the ethos of the blockchain community. It grew out of open source. There's a real need and a momentum towards decentralization. There's a real need for things to be trustless, so that there is no trust, so that there is no entity as such that is responsible for things. So when you talk about us launching a product, we are launching a product, but we are effectively making stuff available for a community to use. And so that is progressively being made available. Some of it's available now, and more of it will be made available throughout the year. And by November 1st, I think just about everything will be there.
And how does it move into our lives as the ecosystem that you're building? How do we tap into it as individuals? And is the government going to balk at this? Would they want to control it, or will it be an open source?
So effectively, when you publish something to public blockchain, it is effectively open source. So all of the data pieces, if you like, that make the infrastructure are already there in public and open, and they can't, once they're there. That's just one of the amazing things about blockchain. It's immutable. Once it's there, it can't be taken away again. And so once the genie's out of the bottle, it can't be put back in. I don't know exactly how government will respond. Government is very, very concerned, obviously, about people's privacy. And so for our technology is a bit of a two-edged sword in many respects. It's making information safe for use by a lot of people, but it's providing an incentive for people to go get that information and put it in there. So I'm not sure how they'll respond to it, to be honest.
So significant resources being devoted, your energy, time. In the end, how do you make money out of this?
Well, we make it. We make it, and this is one of the amazing phenomena that we're seeing at the moment with smart contracts and cryptocurrencies. We actually print money. Like Bitcoin prints money, and Ethereum prints money, and all of the tokens that you see implemented using in ICOs and token generating events, they print money. That money then goes to an exchange, and it gets exchanged for other cryptocurrencies for money. So we make it, we print it.
So what's the currency you're going to be working in, though?
Our currency is called an ID. An ID token. Yeah. Right. And so that ID token carries the information which is used to define an identity in the global structure. It's also the currency that is used to have that information curated and services using it.
Okay.
What's the steps for you from taking it as a startup into something that is up and running? Is there what do you need? Is there any, do you need investors, or do you just need people consuming?
Look, I think it's very much like any other startup, in that you need to tell your story, you need to show what it is that you're going to produce, and then you need to find people who are going to invest their time and effort and potentially their money in the process. The only difference, I think, when it's done in the cryptocurrency space is that you don't have to do it through venture capitalists. You can offer it to ordinary people. you can crowdsource the creation of your company by getting their services and their money.
What do you mean by that? So people buy in,
Yeah,
if I offer my service, I have a portion of the business instead of cash?
Yes, so we print the money, and we use the money that we've printed, the ID tokens, to get people to do work, to build the ID infrastructure, to fix bugs in our software, but also to get in some cash and some other currency as well.
So people can get involved. You have a website. It's called TrigID.org.
Yes, it is.
And you create a profile, or you register, or how do they go about it?
Look, if you want to bid for tokens, there is a bid page there. We're using a process called a blind auction because we think it models the exchange function better than the other mechanisms that are there. You can buy tokens there, or you can just get on any of our social media platforms, a Telegram channel. We have a forum as well, and you can get involved in the project if you like, or you can just find out more about it.
Okay. Well, Stephen, thank you very much for joining us.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it and coming on board. A round of applause from our live audience here for Stephen Young, founder and chief executive or chief technology officer of TrigID. And thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're coming to you live from the Foghorn Brew House, and you can hear the wonderful ambience noise. Everyone's enjoying fantastic pizzas and great beer, and I can smell it, and I'm looking forward to having one after the show.
The Foghorn is also doing gin now, Greg. So
I know,
there is a
gin month.
fantastic selection of refined distilled gin.
Wow.
Wow. I gave it a go earlier. It's quite worth it. Up next, we will be talking with Andrew McCallum. And Andrew will be talking about something that Stephen just touched on, which is working in an ecosystem and sharing resources of suppliers and investors to come in and part own coins, and it's a fascinating way of structuring a business, as well as opening up his own cryptocurrency. So
and all designed around supporting smart tech ups.
Yeah.
Start tech ups.
Yeah. We're going to go to a break, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Yeah, of course, one of the great things about being in a co-working space is that there are others around you facing similar challenges at any particular time. So you're stuck on something, you're talking about it over coffee, someone makes a suggestion, you've got a different way of looking at things. One of the strengths of 1804 being focused around a particular area, clean tech and smart cities, is that we're actually also dealing with very specific problems which are often closely related. And that creates a terrific opportunity. It amplifies the co-working experience.
Your colleagues have no reason to jealously guard their own position. There's no competition aspect. There's no political games of I'm going to be promoted above you, so I'll undermine you. And so everyone goes to these unfamiliar extents to help each other out, because we're all in the same game. You know, if we do well, then our colleagues do well, and if our colleagues do well, then we do well. So there's a real cohesion.
It's a focused co-working space in that residents are building scalable product-based startups, and we're looking to address global markets. But it's focused around a particular vertical, that's clean tech and smart cities. We think that's important because it's really a differentiator for this region. It's a big problem facing the world, solutions to be solved for the future.
Welcome back to the Lunaticks Live, episode 14. I'm getting mixed up with the New Year Awards, which are coming up
It's a
on
nice
September.
segue to the New Year Awards there, Greg.
That's right, I know. But joining us at this stage on the panel is going to be Andrew McCallum, and he's the co-founder of XYZ Innovations. But he's also been working very hard at developing a Bitcoin specifically designed for supporting tech startup companies, and it's called Ozcoin. So, tell us all about it. Andrew, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Olivia. Just a few little corrections there.
Oh,
firstly.
my
So it's not a Bitcoin.
No.
It is a cryptocurrency. And it's based on the Ethereum code, so based on the Ethereum network, so ERC20 token. So Oxcoin is the culmination for us of a hell of a lot of work working in startups, helping other startups, building startups, and really trying to understand what's missing in startup ecosystems and how we can create successful startup ecosystems in areas where we have tremendous founders, we have tremendous support for startups, we have some investors, but we don't have the coherent, focused ecosystem that you see in a lot of places. So at a very high level, that's our mission.
Let's just talk a little bit about your background and how you got here. So you've been working with startups for quite a long time. Just give us an overview of where you've come from.
Certainly. So way back when I worked for CabCharge. So I worked in various tech roles there, helped look after their payment network and their security on that payment network, and then realised that the corporate world of IT really just wasn't for me. There was a whole lot more excitement out there to be had, and I was lucky enough to be in a position inside the organisation there to develop some new products and some new platforms, and then realised that there's a whole other world of startups there that we can get into. So I looked around Newcastle. This was some years ago now, 5 years ago I guess, looked around Newcastle to try and work out whether the community was ready for to really, I guess, take the next push and build an accelerator or an incubator in Newcastle. Realised at the time that it wasn't quite ready. There wasn't quite the coherence that was needed in the community, so I ended up going to Sydney. And so we built Digital Forge in Sydney. So Digital Forge was for want of a better word, an accelerator. It was a foundry to build tech startups, to build mobile app startups, essentially. And we built some startups there. We worked with some startups and built some startups of our own, taking one of them to listing on the ASX. So that was the journey all the way from working out of a library with three of us to ringing the bell at the ASX and everything that goes along with that.
And what was the name of that?
So that was Refined.
Ah, right. Okay.
So Refined has so it was one of the suite of HR startups around that time that listed on the ASX within sort of 12 months before and after we listed, and all saw a very similar fate. So that, the other startups there were OnePage and the Search Party. So the three of us all saw very, very similar patterns in our share prices and in the company to some extent as well. Refine's still running. It's now partnered with a blockchain company called Loyal, and so before I left Refined, I helped to re-architect what they're doing, and so that's now a blockchain company. They do employee engagement, employee rewards and recognition on the blockchain. So
it's a space that you're very familiar with, given the journey you've already gone on to so far, and now coming around. So I'm just interested, you said something that at the time when you came to Newcastle, there just wasn't the, I guess, the environment or the energy there for what you wanted to do? Or?
It wasn't energy, it wasn't environment. There were a lot of people trying really hard and doing some amazing things. But there wasn't a lot of cross-pollination and cooperation to an extent. So there are a lot of people, each with their own opinions, but the community itself wasn't big enough to have everybody with their own opinions pushing in different directions. And now there's still enough people pushing in different directions and doing their own things, but it's certainly, the community's much larger now, but there's also a much larger suite of people from co-working spaces to events to various support organisations to startups who are pushing in the same direction. So it's a whole lot more collaborative, it feels now. There really is this, it seems to me anyway, this attitude in Newcastle and the Greater Hunter region that there are tremendous people here, and there are some tremendous companies, and there's going to be more tremendous companies if we all work together.
So what are you doing to bridge the gap with your experience and your connection in the industry, and now that you're opening up Oxcoin?
tell me about bridging the gap and coming from having startups as enterprises that you launch to now working in an ecosystem.
So one of the things we realised was that it's the challenges that the startups and startup founders face is often put down to a lack of capital. But the reality is that it's more of an ability to get stuff done. And capital can certainly enable that. But within a small, or within a community, like a startup community, as small or as big as it happens to be. I mean, you could look at the whole Australian startup community as a single community. It's still small inside the economy, inside the Australian economy. So the work and the effort that goes on inside the community and the growth that's seen inside that community often isn't reflected in value at an economy level. Purely because, I mean, our economy is in essence controlled by our four big banks. You see the stock market go up or the stock market go down based on the success of the banks. You see the dollar go up and go down based on various factors, but the banks certainly influence it. The success of some tremendous Australian startups like Atlassian, Canva, have no impact on the Australian dollar, have no impact on people going down the road and being able to buy something cheaper or more expensive or pay for a service that's cheaper or more expensive. But the community itself, I mean, there's so much innovation, so much work, so much effort that goes into building these innovative companies that there's that disconnect between the size of the community and the size of the economy is something that I think needs a medium for that value exchange to fix, and a cryptocurrency is a perfect medium for that.
No, I'm just going back to that notion of where we're at and the push forward. The big problem I think that we definitely face in trying to bring attention and aware of the extraordinary things that are happening underneath is that I think predominantly people just don't understand. I mean, broadly, I made the faux pas because of Bitcoin, and that's almost like it's part of the shorthand people have. Oh, Bitcoin,
yes,
because it's so prominent. So what are you doing to overcome that with Oxcoin?
So the first thing is, and it's not something we're doing a tremendous job at yet, but the very first thing is we're trying not to use too much jargon. There is a lot of jargon, there's a lot of confusion. We're really trying to bring it down to the core elements and to help people understand what a cryptocurrency is used for, and probably not what it is used for, but what it should be and can be used for. And how that applies to a community like a startup community. So, for instance, I mean, if you look at Bitcoin, for instance, as a currency, its value is based upon its scarcity. It's more valuable the scarcer it gets. And you can buy things with it. I mean, you can buy pizza with a Bitcoin, but it has no, like any currency, I mean, it has no intrinsic value. Its value is only what you can buy or sell for it. Now, a national currency is backed by a national economy. So that intrinsic value, while it's completely arbitrary, is still controlled. It is centralised and it's controlled and it exists within the economy. A Bitcoin, for instance, on the other hand, doesn't have that. Now, a cryptocurrency gives us the perfect opportunity to decentralise, to take that controlling, the centralised controlling mechanism out of that economy and say, no, the value of what you do has nothing to do with whether the big four banks made $12 billion profit this year or $4 billion profit, and whether the executives went to the Bahamas or whether they went to Fiji. None of that makes a difference and shouldn't make a difference to the success of your business within its ecosystem or within its community. So the cryptocurrency, the ability for it to be contained to build a new economy and to build an economy within a community that sees a fair representation of value for the work done in that community, and then I mean, to come back to answer the question, it's I guess really just trying to explain that, to try and drag, and like I said, I'm not very good at taking all of the jargon out of it. Try and drag some of this jargon out of it. Trying not to talk about ecosystems. Trying not to talk about fiat. Try not to talk about the various investments and how equity works. Just trying to help people understand how controlling or containing the economy within a community can be to the benefit of everyone in that community.
Yeah, so that's what you're trying to achieve with Oxcoin. You're trying to have an ecosystem of different startups under the same banner, using the same cryptocurrency, and that is backing the cryptocurrency. So instead of CommBank backing it, the grouping of those companies creates the value of the coin. Is that right?
Yeah. So ultimately our goal is to ensure that the global innovation community and the global startup community, that the value inherent in the transactions within that. So whether it's you've got a startup and you need a website built. And maybe it's a startup, maybe it's not a startup, maybe it's a pub. Maybe you've got a pub and you decide, okay, we need some marketing done, we need some social marketing, and we need a website. And you can go and pay dollars for that and get that done. But if that marketing and that website was core to the success of your company, of your business, then in a fair economy, that would be represented through a value growth within that community. And not just because more people go and use that service now, more people say, oh, that was an awesome website, it made that business thrive, I'll go and use them, because the whole value of the community at that point is lifted. So for Oxcoin in a startup community, it is saying, because we have this construct of investment, and exchanging equity for investment, there is this construct then of if we do this right, then the community not only profit from it because the value of the services is there, but profit from it because the value of the startups increase. So the ownership of that startup, the ownership of the companies then exists also partially within that economy. Now, ideally, it will be wholly within that economy.
So in other terms, it's a point system of equity for the service providers helping the startup.
Kind of. You think about barter card with equity. So you can pay with something other than the dollars that you pay for. You pay for something within the community. But there's actually an equity component to that. So that it's not just, this is now worth $1. This is worth $1, but it's also worth the portion of that company that's now succeeding. And as the value of that company goes up, then the value of the whole economy goes up.
So, specifically startup companies and tech startup companies, how do you envisage Oxcoin to actually work in that space, though, specifically? Are there some examples that you could give us to sort of demonstrate that?
Certainly. So one of the So this has come out of, XYZ Innovations is our company. Now, we make investments into startups and early stage companies. Now, the concept for Oxcoin is that and there's a lot of tech to build between now and when we actually make the first investment in this manner. But the way that we'll make this investment is that there'll be coins already issued and people will own the coins. We'll buy those coins back from people. So for anyone that wants to sell them, we'll buy those coins back, and then we will, instead of investing dollars, Australian dollars, into a startup, we'll invest these tokens, these Ox coins, into a startup. That startup can then use those Ox coins to pay for services. So we have a large component to the community, to the startup community in Newcastle and the Valley, already supportive of this. So we have co-working spaces, we have lawyers, we have accountants, we have digital providers, we have marketers, we have HR people. We've got a large component to the service providers that service startups and young companies prepared to accept these coins, these Ox coins, from the startup. Now, the reason they do that is because that Ox coin then represents potential for growth in that community. but also because the next time we go make an investment from XYZ, we're going to say, okay, we need to make another investment. That means we need to buy more coins. So for any business that does accept these coins, we can say you don't have to be afraid about there not being any liquidity on the market, not being anyone ready to buy or wanting to buy your tokens that you've accepted from this startup, because we need to buy these tokens from the community so that we can make an investment back into another startup.
I understand that you're currently building to launch. Do you have a date in mind, and what are the steps involved to launch this product?
We have many dates in mind, and there are many steps involved. Our aim is to make the first investment through this manner by the sort of first or second quarter next year. So either end of the first quarter, start of the second quarter next year. There's a hell of a lot of work that needs to go on before that. And at the moment we're in the midst of our private pre-sale, so we've sold some or taken some investment in our company already for that, and had some interest in selling some in the private pre-sale tokens. The next step after that then is our public sale. So the public token sale will, if we don't sell the whole component in the private pre-sale, will be towards the end of July that it starts, and hopefully it lasts, well, a few hours or a few minutes, as all good ICOs do.
Depending on the popularity, and
that's
everyone
right,
gets to throw them in there.
Our ultimate goal is to make sure that we funded this before we go to public sale. This is not about just taking this investment to build this, because the success of what we're doing revolves around having the whole community involved. So if we can get the community to back this and support this, so that's a community of founders, community of service providers, and community of investors. If we can get those people to already support this and support the building of this economy before we go to the public sale, then that's ideal, because that says to us that there is this validation, not just of people who are excited by it, but people who are prepared to put their money behind it and say, yeah, this is how we see the economy moving.
Okay, so that's the one question I'm interested in. How do people get involved, and how does startups come to you, or individuals who are interested, service providers and so forth? What's the process?
Yeah, certainly. So startups come to us, and they do at the moment. We get startups approaching us all the time, speaking to us about how we can help them, about what they need, where they're at in their business. Service providers, anyone keen to be involved in the first stage of this economy, please contact me. There is so the website for our token is auxhub.xyz. So that's auxhub.xyz. People can go there. There's a contact us form on that. For anyone who is interested in, as I said, it is a private pre-sale. So we are selling initially to our network, to our close network. We're not going out any further than that, but if anyone is particularly interested, again, they have to just reach out to us. Happy to have a conversation and see how people can be involved.
So all of those details that Andrew and also what Stephen spoke about can be also found at the Lunaticks Live website. After this, we've all gone up and somebody sat down and put all the details in. But joining us here is...
Yes, we're going to engage in a panel discussion, bringing Stephen Young back into the mix. We thought we'd talk a little bit more in depth about what is blockchain and cryptocurrency and how they're connected, and kind of some of the needs to know about the technology. I think a lot of people are probably here tonight because it is such an abstract idea. However, blockchain has been around for quite some time. Andrew, you're quite knowledgeable in the space of blockchain. Blockcoin, why not? Why don't you start off the discussion? Let us know how it kind of evolved. Where did it start and how did it evolve?
Well, I'm not that knowledgeable.
I'll make it up.
I do know the company who was actually the CTO of the company who issued the first digital currency or first cryptocurrency, but it was not based on a blockchain. The reason for the existence of the blockchain was to solve the double spend problem. So if you have a digital currency, you don't have a physical representation. And this problem exists in our economy as it is today. I mean, more of the money that we spend is digital than is actually physical, paper and coins. And if you have a note, there's one note. No one else can spend that while you're spending it. But if that $5 note is represented just by a line on computer somewhere, if that's not centralised, not centrally controlled, then the risk is, how do I know that I just spent this $5 digital currency on a beer before you did, Greg? And so this is where the blockchain and the consensus comes in, because in a blockchain, it is entirely possible for the same thing to happen, for that same two transactions to happen, but at some point the chain needs to reach consensus. So and that means that all the nodes, all of the different machines who are running the code for this blockchain need to agree that a particular block is correct, so that my $5 beer block is correct, not your $5 beer block. I mean, Stephen, you might actually know more about the history of blockchain and when it came about.
Probably not. Look, I like to look at blockchain as if you're an accountant. A blockchain is like a ledger. So if you're familiar with the general ledger, you issue money against an account, or you take money from an account, and it's truth. And so when you commit that to blockchain, it can't be changed. And so that solves the double spending problem, because money goes from one account to another account, and once it's registered in there, it can't be changed. And there's a very interesting book I'd encourage anyone to read called The Truth Machine, and I think it kind of encapsulates what blockchain is about. It is a place where you can encapsulate the truth, and it can't be changed over a period of time, and that's a very, very useful thing these days.
I mean, in a very simple way, it's a bit like home ownership. Now, once I've freed up my mortgage and they've given me the deeds, that belongs to me. And then if I want to sell that house, that information is contained in a paper record that I'm selling it to X, Y, or my brother, or whoever. And effectively, however, the history of that can be broken if the paper records are lost or destroyed.
Yep.
Whereas with blockchain, as my understanding is that literally, because it exists within a digital space, the entire history of that transaction is kept. And that's why it actually takes so much computing energy to keep that going. Is that correct? Is that
well, look, it needn't take that much energy. It takes that much energy because of the mechanism that's being used to validate the block. It's called proof of work, and when the Bitcoin was originally produced, the fictitious Satoshi Nakamoto said, we need something that we can peg against when we make a new Bitcoin, right? So we make a new Bitcoin, how do we determine what it's worth? We better give it a certain amount of power. And so that history has become, I guess, enshrined in the way Bitcoin is mined and produced, and to a certain extent the other cryptocurrencies as well. They're made computationally intensive so that you've got something to peg the value to, but there's a whole new wave of blockchains and a whole new wave of changes coming, which are loosely based on, like voting, if you like, proof of stake, based on people that will not use all this electricity. So it's in many ways it's an anachronism. It's a point in time where blockchain is using so much power, it won't need to use so much power for much longer. Yeah.
Well, Steve, I can take you into some territory that you may be more comfortable in, which is you were originally started out your career as a molecular biologist. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
There was a fascinating program on the Science Show with Robin Williams where they were starting to talk about the processes, and within the natural world, effectively, blockchain in a way is mimicking what's been going on in our biology ever since the beginning of, that little asteroid that happened to land in this sort of smouldering mess of what was to become planet Earth. It's triggered off something. So you want to speak to that?
Look, that is an interesting perspective. If you look at the human genome or any genome, If you knew what to look for, you would probably see evidence of every change that happened over the 2 billion years or 4 billion years of evolution. It's nothing like as organised, obviously, as blockchain. Because it's basically a mess. It was hatched rather than designed. Probably shouldn't go there. But certainly the human genome is a very interesting record of our history, and the morphology or the shape that we see today is a product of that genome rolling down the hill for 4 billion years. Much the same as what you see on a blockchain, in the end, is a product of all those transactions. And the data structures that we build are based on that. We basically read the whole lot from start to end and build a database from that. And the end result is the equivalent of an organism, if you like. Yeah.
So how is government dealing with such a large influx of people creating their own cryptocurrencies? Is government wanting to regulate?
Well, look, I mean, government is doing what government does. They're there to look after us, but they're there to look after us using the rules that they have themselves, which are what the parliamentarians give them and what precedent gives them. And so in every country, they're scrambling around looking at how they're going to deal with the issues that cryptocurrencies are producing. And every jurisdiction is a little bit different, but generally, they're looking at the current wave of ICOs, for example, which is effectively what Andrew and I are doing, generating tokens which are making our own money and saying, hey, these are securities. They need to be regulated the way that shares are regulated. In other countries, they're looking at them and saying they're financial instruments. They need to be regulated the way financial instruments are. And in many respects, they're right, because it is the Wild West. But when people say, well, they've got to be regulated because it's the Wild West, I point out that the Wild West in the US was the time when some of the most amazing change happened. The Trans-Pacific Railroad, for example, in today's dollars was capitalised at $2 trillion, and they made the equivalent of $700 billion worth of tokens in order to fund it. Yeah.
Okay, so this brings us very nicely, and I'd love to get your input to it, Andrew, as well. So in terms of government, their response, and we know at the moment government is really struggling with a whole raft of issues, but are they in a position at the moment, or are they thinking about policy on this area at the moment? Or are they going to be looking at what they already have in place, which clearly, a la the Banking World Commission, has seemed to have failed us miserably, but anyway. Are they working in that space at the moment? In your conversations?
I can't speak to what the government will or won't do, but there are certainly a lot of discussions being had across the various regulators globally. As Stephen mentioned, the SEC and more recently ASIC have both come out and said that their stance. So the SEC have said that their stance is that ICOs, cryptocurrencies, or the issue of a cryptocurrency is the issue of a security, and as such it needs to go through the same thing. It needs to go through exactly the same checks and balances you'd go through if you were selling part of your company to people. ASIC have come out more recently and said that that's how they're leaning as well. Our tax officers globally are trying to understand exactly how to treat taxation for this, and there are various suggestions and some, I think, preliminary rulings around that. But I guess as Stephen mentioned, it is the Wild West, and they know the horse is bolted. You can't bring this horse back. Cryptocurrencies and this way of expressing an economy is here to stay. The question is, how do we make sure we do it in a way that works for everybody, in a way that that protects people putting money into these things, that makes sure that anyone trying to sell it is doing the right thing, and to make sure also one of the main concerns that I hear from the regulators is, how do we ensure that the money laundering isn't happening? If this is to a large extent anonymous and anonymised, then how do we know where the money's going, and how do we stop it from being a haven for money laundering? So all of these questions, and a lot of the questions don't yet exist, but all of these components form part of the discussion on how we, as nations and as economies, address the issue of cryptocurrencies, how we address ICOs. And blockchains, the blockchain itself has a connection to that in most people's minds, for right or wrong. But the question really is, how do we make sure that these cryptocurrencies, people aren't going to be losing their houses, aren't going to be losing their entire life savings, that, if they do make a decision to join an economy where a cryptocurrency is a method for value transaction, then how do we make sure that they're the right people to be involved in that, they know what they're getting into, and they're not just going to end up losing the house, losing the wife, losing the kids?
And I think that's what Stephen is attempting to do with his ability to look after everyone and keep us all safe. That's all we have time for on the discussion of blockchain and Bitcoin. Oh, sorry, cryptocurrency. My bad.
See, you did it again. I mean,
you did it.
I know I did it. Started off.
Before we go, we just need to talk about the Newey Awards. The Newey Awards are coming up on the 27th of September, and in August 17, submission dates close. So do get in your submissions for the Newey Awards. It's always a really great ceremony. It's a great evening, and we'd love to support tech and innovation in all regional areas of Australia. So it's not just Newcastle, it's regional Australia. Thanks so much, Greg. Thanks so much, Andrew and Stephen.
And a round of applause to our guests up here. Lunatics Live, episode 14. Blockchain and cryptocurrency, where it's all going to. We've only touched the iceberg at this stage. Clearly below the surface lies bigger issues. And thank you very much, everyone out there in digital land, joining us here at the Lunatics Live. And we look forward to seeing you very soon, in 2 months' time.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye.